I just found out my wife secretly sold our family home for $350, $0, then lied about splitting the proceeds, only to discover she's been laundering the money through her sister's business. How do I fight for my share in the messy legal aftermath? Hello, everyone. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Now, let's begin the video. Using a throwaway for obvious reasons, with certain specifics modified to preserve anonymity. I never thought I'd find myself in a situation like this. You hear about betrayal, lies, and secret affairs, but when it hits this close to home, it's a gut punch you never see coming. It all started with a simple gut feeling. Something was off with Lisa, my wife. We'd been together for 10 years, built a life, shared a house, had a kid. I thought I knew her better than anyone. But then I noticed little things: her phone buzzing late at night, her being unusually defensive when I asked about her whereabouts, and her suddenly working late more often than not. At first, I brushed it off. Maybe she was stressed about work, or just busy, but deep down I knew something was wrong. The first real sign came when I decided to check her phone. I know, it's not exactly noble, but I was suspicious. I never thought I'd be that guy, but I was desperate for answers. I snuck a peek while she was in the shower. The messages I saw made my stomach drop. There were texts from a guy named Mike, flirty, suggestive, talking about meeting up after she drops the kid off at her sister. I saw photos of her in a hotel room, her arm around him, smiling in a way she never smiled at me anymore. My heart clenched. She was cheating on me, right under my nose, and I hadn't even suspected a thing. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept going over everything I'd seen. I felt betrayed, humiliated, angry. How long had this been going on? Was she lying to me about everything? I confronted her the next day, trying to keep my voice steady. I asked her outright if she was cheating, and she, bitchy as ever, shot back with some bullshit about me being paranoid, insecure, that I didn't trust her. She called me crazy and accused me of spying on her because I was jealous, but I knew the truth. I had seen the messages, the photos. There was no denying it. She was having sex with Mike, and she'd been doing it for months. The revelation hit me like a freight train. I felt a mix of rage and despair. How could she do this? After everything we built, she was out there screwing around, and then she lied about it. But it got worse. I started digging into her phone and bank accounts. That's when I uncovered even more. Turns out she wasn't just cheating, she was hiding a lot. I found out she'd secretly sold our family home for $350, $0, without telling me. She'd lied about splitting the money, claiming she was saving it for the kids' college fund. But the truth was far more sinister. I traced the money, and it led to her sister's business. Apparently, Lisa had been laundering the proceeds from the sale through her sister's company, moving money back and forth to hide the real amount she'd pocketed. I was stunned. She lied about everything: our finances, her fidelity, her loyalty. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut so many times I couldn't breathe. How could she be so manipulative, so utterly selfish? I trusted her with my life, and she was out there screwing around and secretly siphoning our money. It's like I was living with a stranger, a liar, a thief. The hardest part isn't just the betrayal, it's realizing that the person you loved and trusted the most turned out to be capable of such deception. My mind was racing. What do I do now? How do I fight for what's mine, especially when she's clearly been planning this for months? I knew I had to act fast, but I wasn't sure where to start. All I knew was that I couldn't let her get away with this. After discovering all this, I felt like I was in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. The betrayal wasn't just emotional, it was financial, legal, everything. I remember sitting in my own living room, staring at the pile of evidence I'd collected: screenshots of her messages, bank statements, the details of the house sale, and the trail of money laundering through her sister's business. My mind kept racing. How could she have been so reckless, so ruthless? She lied about everything, and now I was left to pick up the pieces of a life I thought was solid. I knew I needed to confront her again, but this time with a plan. I waited until she was out at her sister for some business meeting, as she called it. I sat down and started drafting what I'd say, how I'd approach this. I couldn't just accuse her without proof. I had to be smart about this. I called a lawyer first, which was a shock in itself. I never thought I'd be the guy needing legal help over my wife's mess, but I had to protect myself, my son, my rights. The lawyer told me to gather everything, proof of the house sale, the bank transfers, the messages, everything that showed her deception. When Lisa came back that evening, I was ready. I told her I knew what she'd done, that I had the evidence to prove her lies. Her face twisted, her eyes flashing with anger and defiance. She denied everything at first, calling me paranoid, accusing me of spying on her, of being jealous. She said she was just trying to protect the family, that the house sale was a business decision she made alone, but I cut her off. I laid out everything I had: screenshots, bank statements, the transfer receipts. Her face drained of color. She started to sputter, trying to come up with excuses, but I wasn't having it. That's when she snapped. She started screaming, calling me all kinds of names: jealous, insecure, controlling. She told me I was overreacting, that I didn't understand what she was going through. She said she'd been under so much stress that she needed something for herself, and that I was just a boring, predictable husband who couldn't handle her success. That was the moment I realized how far gone she was. She lied about everything: about the affair, the money, the house sale. She'd spun this web of deceit so thick that even I started questioning myself. But I knew the truth. I saw her for what she was. The emotional toll was brutal. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach every single day since I found out. I was furious, but also deeply hurt. How could she betray me like this? How could she lie about the biggest thing in our lives: our home, our money, our family? I kept thinking about the times I defended her, trusted her, supported her dreams. All of it felt like a lie now. But I also knew I couldn't let her get away with it, not without a fight. I decided I had to take legal action, get an attorney, file for divorce, and fight for my share of the money she'd stolen or laundered. I wasn't just angry, I was determined. This wasn't just about the house or the money, it was about justice. I wanted her to pay for what she did, to face the consequences of her betrayal. Over the next few days, I gathered every piece of evidence I could find. I made copies of bank statements, took screenshots of her messages, and compiled a timeline of her lies. I reached out to a lawyer specializing in family law and financial crimes. The process was overwhelming. I'd never been involved in anything like this before. Every time I thought about her lying to me, cheating on me, stealing from us, it fueled my resolve. I wasn't going to let her walk away with everything she'd taken. I was angry, yes, but also clear-headed. I knew I had to fight for what was rightfully mine, for my son's future, and for the integrity of what we once had. I didn't know exactly how it was going to play out, but I knew I wouldn't go down without a fight. The more I dug into her financials, the more I uncovered. It was like peeling back layers of a lie she'd carefully constructed. I found out she sold the house for $350, $0, something she kept secret from me until I stumbled on the proof. She told me she was just holding on to it, waiting for the right moment to sell. But the truth was, she'd been planning this for months. She'd already arranged the sale through her sister's business, and the money had been transferred into various accounts she controlled. The amount she'd actually pocketed was more than I ever imagined. She'd lied about splitting the proceeds, claiming she'd put it into savings for our son's future, but all I saw was her laundering it through her sister's business. When I confronted her with the evidence, her reaction was infuriating. She denied everything, claiming she was just being smart with the money, that I was paranoid and jealous. She said she'd done nothing wrong and that I was overreacting. It was classic Lisa. She'd lie, spin stories, and manipulate until she got her way. She kept saying she deserved to do what she wanted, that she was under so much stress, and that I was just a boring husband who couldn't handle her success. That's when I realized she had no remorse. She was completely detached from reality, justifying her actions as if she was entitled to everything she'd taken. She started throwing accusations back at me, saying I was controlling and insecure. She claimed I didn't support her ambitions, that I was holding her back. She even tried to turn it around, saying I was the one cheating because I'd looked at her phone. I was furious. I told her I'd had enough of her lies, that I wasn't going to let her destroy what we built. I told her I was going to take legal action, that I'd fight for my rights and for our son's future. I made it clear I wasn't going to be silenced or manipulated anymore. That's when she really lost her temper. She screamed at me, calling me jealous, paranoid, and a damn control freak. She accused me of trying to ruin her, of being insecure about her success and her affair. Honestly, I felt like I was losing my mind. The emotional roller coaster was brutal. One moment I was furious and ready to explode. The next I was overwhelmed with sadness and betrayal. I trusted her with everything, our home, our money, our life, and she'd been secretly screwing around, laundering money, and lying to my face. I kept asking myself how I didn't see it sooner. How did I miss all the signs? But the truth is, I was blindsided. I loved her. I still do, even after everything. But love doesn't fix betrayal. It just makes it harder to process. I knew I had to keep going. I contacted a lawyer specializing in family and financial law. I wanted to understand my options, how to get my fair share of the house sale, how to stop her from hiding more money, and how to protect myself legally. The lawyer told me to be prepared for a messy fight. Lisa wasn't going down without a battle, especially now that she saw I was serious. She'd always been manipulative, lying, gaslighting, twisting the truth to her advantage. But I was done playing nice. I was ready to stand my ground. I knew this was only the beginning of a long, complicated legal process. But I also knew I couldn't let her get away with it. Not anymore. I had to fight for what was rightfully mine, for my son's future, and for some shred of justice in this mess. The days that followed were a blur of legal consultations, gathering more evidence, and trying to keep my head straight amid the chaos. I stayed up late every night, poring over bank statements, screenshots, and every scrap of proof I could find. Lisa's lies kept piling up, and I needed to be ready for whatever she threw at me. The more I uncovered, the clearer it became that her entire story about the house sale and her protecting the family was just a cover for her greed and deception. I discovered that she had been funneling money through her sister's business for months. She'd been laundering the proceeds from the house sale, taking large sums, disguising them as loans or business expenses, and moving the cash around to hide her tracks. She'd even opened new bank accounts under her sister's name to avoid detection. Every time I thought I had a handle on her scheme, she'd come up with another lie or cover-up. I kept thinking, how could she be so calculated, so cold? I knew I had to confront her again, but this time with a legal strategy. I told my lawyer I wanted to file for full disclosure, demanding she reveal all her accounts, her transactions, everything. I wanted a forensic accountant involved to trace the money trail. I also wanted to freeze her assets, just in case she tried to move anything else. The lawyer warned me it would be a tough fight, especially since Lisa was good at hiding her tracks, but I was determined. I couldn't let her get away with stealing from us, especially not from our kid. When I sat her down to talk again, her reaction was even more defensive. She spun stories about how I was trying to ruin her, how she'd done nothing wrong, and that I was just jealous because she was successful. She accused me of spying, of invading her privacy, and of trying to control her. I told her I had enough of her lies, that I knew about the sale, the laundering, and her deception. I laid out the evidence again, showing her I wasn't going to back down. Her face twisted in anger, and she snapped back with more accusations, calling me insecure, a terrible husband, and claiming I was just jealous of her success. Honestly, I've never felt so betrayed. It was like she was trying to gaslight me into thinking I was crazy for suspecting her. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying everything: the betrayal, the lies, the fact that she'd been secretly selling our house and laundering the money through her sister's business. The thought of her lying to me, using me, and then turning around to accuse me of ruining her life made me sick. I realized I had to be prepared for a long fight. This wasn't going to be over quickly. She had resources, connections, and a willingness to lie her way out of anything. But I also had the truth. And I was ready to use every legal tool I could find to fight back. I finally decided I'd file for divorce, but more than that. I wanted to recover what was mine, my fair share of the house sale, the money she'd laundered, and compensation for the betrayal. I knew I'd need to get a court order to freeze her assets, and I wanted to force her to disclose everything. I also wanted to ensure she couldn't hide any more money or assets from me. It was clear she'd been planning this for some time, and I had to act fast. I couldn't let her continue to manipulate, lie, and steal. I was angry, yes, but more than that, I was determined. I would fight for my rights, for my son's future, and for the justice that she so clearly didn't deserve. This was only the beginning of what promised to be a messy, exhausting legal battle, but I knew I couldn't back down now. I had to see it through, no matter how hard it got. The legal process dragged on for weeks, and every day felt like walking through a minefield. Lisa was doing everything she could to stall, to spin more lies, and to keep hiding her tracks. She hired her own lawyer, of course, and the two of them seemed to be working in tandem to drag this out as long as possible. Meanwhile, I was stacking up evidence, working with forensic accountants, and preparing for the fight of my life. I wasn't just after the house or the money. I wanted her to pay for what she'd done, to face consequences for betraying our family and stealing from us. One day, I got a call from my lawyer. She'd finally managed to get a court order to freeze Lisa's accounts and to force her to produce full financial disclosures. It was a huge win, but I knew it was just the beginning. Lisa was furious, of course. She called me every name in the book, accused me of ruining her life, and tried to spin it as if I was the villain. But I didn't care. I had the proof now, and I was more determined than ever to see this through. When the court hearing started, Lisa's lies started unraveling fast. The forensic accountant uncovered more hidden accounts, more unreported cash transfers, and evidence of her laundering the proceeds from the house sale through her sister's business. It was a mess, but it was also a clear trail of her deception. I sat in the courtroom, watching her squirm as the evidence was presented. It was satisfying, but also heartbreaking, seeing her try to deny everything, trying to maintain her facade of innocence. She insisted she'd done nothing wrong, that I was just jealous and paranoid. But the evidence spoke for itself. I also discovered she'd been having an affair with Mike for months, and that was the final nail in the coffin. It was one thing to suspect, but now I had proof, text messages, hotel receipts, and witnesses confirming their relationship. That was a punch to the gut, knowing she'd not only betrayed me financially but also emotionally. It made me realize how deeply she'd been lying, manipulating, and cheating. The woman I thought I knew was a complete stranger, a con artist hiding behind a facade of a loving wife. Throughout it all, I felt a mix of relief and anger. Relief that I finally had proof and could fight back legally. Anger that she'd done this to us, to our family. I kept asking myself how I'd let it get this far, how I'd missed all the signs. But I also knew that dwelling on the past wouldn't help. I had to focus on the future, getting what was mine, protecting my son, and making sure Lisa faced the consequences of her actions. I wasn't going to be a victim of her lies anymore. The court finally scheduled a hearing to determine the division of assets, the repayment of the stolen money, and the custody arrangements. I prepared everything meticulously, documented evidence, witness statements, everything I could to prove her deception and her financial misconduct. When the day came, I felt a strange mix of exhaustion and resolve. I knew this was going to be a long battle, but I also knew I had to see it through to the end. I couldn't let her walk away with everything, her lies, her schemes, her betrayal. I was done being the victim. It was time to stand up, fight for what's rightfully mine, and finally put this nightmare behind me. The final court date was a whirlwind. I sat there feeling like I was on trial myself, watching Lisa sit across from me, her face a mask of defiance and guilt all at once. The courtroom was tense, the air thick with unspoken accusations. When the judge finally spoke, it was clear I had the upper hand. The evidence of her lies, the money laundering, the affair, it all painted a picture of a woman who'd betrayed everything she was supposed to stand for. The judge ordered her to pay back the full amount from the house sale, including interest and penalties for the laundering. She was also ordered to surrender her control over the hidden accounts and assets she'd been trying to hide. The custody hearing was more emotional. I wanted my son to be protected from her manipulations and lies. I argued that her behavior, lying, cheating, laundering, showed she was unfit to make decisions in his best interest. I was awarded primary custody, with supervised visitation for Lisa, at least until she could prove she was serious about making real changes. It was a bittersweet victory. I loved my son more than anything, but I felt a deep sadness for what he'd been through, and anger that Lisa had put him in this position. When everything was finally settled, I felt a strange sense of relief. The legal battle was over and I could finally start rebuilding. I realized how much I'd learned through all this, about trust, about the importance of honesty, and about the resilience of a person who refuses to give up. I also learned that sometimes the people closest to you can betray you in ways you never imagined, and that you have to fight to protect what's yours. Looking back, I wish I could say I feel nothing but satisfaction. But honestly, I feel a mixture of anger, sadness, and exhaustion. Betrayal cuts deep, and it's hard to rebuild the trust that's been shattered. But I also feel a cautious hope. Hope that I can move on, that I can find happiness again, and that I can teach my son what integrity and honesty really mean. To anyone who finds themselves in a similar situation, trust your instincts, gather your proof, and don't be afraid to fight for what's right. Betrayal hurts, but it also reveals who people really are. And sometimes it's only through the pain that you learn your true strength. I've come out of this battered but wiser. I know now that no amount of lies or deception can break a person who refuses to give up. And in the end, justice isn't just about money or legal wins. It's about reclaiming your life and dignity.